where they're at right now is they're breaking the bondage of being so twofold, right? Is what I'm seeing. One is they're surrendering their childhood, right? They're surrendering this concept of no responsibility, a concept where everything's free, a concept where you just do what the fuck you want to do, and there's no real foundation other than like, okay, you have chores to do, you got to wake up at a certain time, got to go to school, stuff like that. I mean, they do that when they're young, but they have to let go of a lot of their identity. And a friend of mine actually helped me come to this understanding because he's young. He's a lot younger than me. He's about 10 years younger, actually. He's 28, and he's probably my best friend out here in the woodlands, man. He's way ahead of his time, bro. But being 28, he still can relate more about the feelings and the things that he went through in high school, right? Whereas like I'm almost 40, like those feelings and all that shit starts to elude you a little bit. You're like, fuck, I'm old, number one, they're releasing their childhood identity and this whole being free and ignorance is bliss kind of identity. And then they're also having to almost break the bond between the parent and child, right? Like, and that's something that I'm just now starting to understand is that I remember being close to my mom. And then when I got into high school, it didn't matter what my mom said anymore, right? It was like my friends influenced me, I influenced me, but I was doing my own thing, thinking my own thoughts. I wasn't worried about my mom's feelings. I wasn't worried, I wasn't in her world anymore. And I don't remember having to go through a process of breaking that bondage to my mom, like the mouth on the nipple, right? And having to break the childhood bondage. But I do very clearly remember coming back around in my 20s going like, damn, like I fucking ignored my mom for the last like handful of years. You know what I mean? Like she's been the one constant in my life has been my mom, right? And her support and her love, because I asked her one day, I was like, how did you go? Because I went from being a heavy metalhead like in the early 90s and like screaming, singing, guitars playing and shit. We used to be practicing in my living room, right? And then like I completely flipped and like just fell in love with hip hop for many years. And I remember my mom going from like being a metal fan to being a hip hop fan. And I remember asking her, I was like, what? I was like, how did you go from that to that? And like, you're old and you're like in the Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix and that's when she told me this shit. She was like, look, man, you got to understand that, like, if you want to be part of your kids' lives, you have to fall in love with what they're in love with. Not try to make them love with what you have or what you love or what you like. You try to force them to love what you love, and it's a no-go. They'll break that bond way quicker than... I put limitations on their phones and all that stuff. And I mean, as a parent, that's probably the only thing you can really do is try to monitor and try to hold them back. But I mean, they were exposed to profanity and nudity and all these things at a lot younger age than I was. Like, they were desensitized. Like, and I remember going through a phone, maybe it was on my phone or something. It was before they had phones. I remember going through and like putting filters and all this stuff on there to try to prevent them. Or I was watching a video or something, and I remember one of my kids telling me, they were like, I don't know why you're hiding it because we see that shit on the bus going to school every day. And I'm like, what do you mean? And, come to find out, yeah, they were on the bus with high schoolers, right? High school kids don't have restrictions on their phones, really, so they're sitting there watching God knows what, porn, I don't even know. Like, they were watching some pretty bad shit when they were 8, 9 years old. They were telling me about some of the stuff that they were seeing on the buses. So I can only imagine. So it's like, I don't know, where do you draw that line is a good question that I have as a parent is like, point, do you say, okay, you're going to see this shit anyways. I'm just alienating myself by trying to confine something that's going to explode anyways, right? Like I'm just, right? In their mind, I'm creating demands and rules that restrict them from being individuals. And so when you do that, your kids tend to pull away, right? Emotionally, whatever it is. And this is the thing, Kyle. So this is my lesson right now that I'm learning is how to let go. Is how to let go of trying to be their friend and just be their fucking father and make sure that there's parameters and structure in place for the next however many years. Because I already know, like I said, when I was a kid, I broke that bond and I just went my own direction for a while, right? I came back around. I love my mom to death. We talk all the time, but it took many years for that to happen. Like, so I think it was around 24 when I knew that I was going to have a kid was when me and my mom, like, to reconnect. Cause I'm like, Mom, what the fuck? You know, what am I going to do? I got kids. I'm 24 years old. I don't know nothing about raising kids, you know? So that's kind of how it all played out for me. You know, maybe some people kind of come back around at a younger age or something. I don't know. I don't know how it works for everyone else, but there does seem to be a pattern to that most people go through that, you know, to a certain age, you like almost hate your parents for no damn reason, you know?
A lot of it is when people come back from college, you know, age 23, 24. That's like when I came back, you know, you've been gone for 4 years or whatever, 4 or 5 years, and you come home. This is like the story of the country right now. But trying to, like, you know, conflict resolution at that point after you've been on your own, that's where a lot of issue is. But, you know, I touch on things about, you know, post-trauma, addiction, maladaptive behavior, self-esteem training and goal setting and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, your kids are at the age now where it's the same age that I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol and other drugs.
Same here.
Yeah. And then I came from a generational family of alcoholism and addiction. My family, I think we've spoken in the past, and you've mentioned there's a history of alcoholism or addiction in your family line. How does that play into how you parent and how you have an expanded perspective over the situation now?
I think so. I mean, and a lot of people may not agree with a lot of the things I choose and never did. Like for example, I never told my kids they couldn't use curse words. People were like, "Oh, they're going to get in trouble at school." They've never once gotten in trouble at school for cursing, right? They can curse all day around here. I don't care. They're words. They don't mean anything other than what intention you put behind them, right? So for me, I give them a lot of freedom because I know it's going to happen. I just know shit's going to happen. Like, I'm not saying they're going to be drug addicts or they're going to even get into hard drugs, but more than likely with the curiosity in their minds and from what I've observed, they're going to experiment with different things. And so if they can be honest with me and ask me honest questions before they do things, then I can't prevent them from being addicts. There's no question about that, dude. There is nothing in the world that could have stopped me from going down the road I went down. I don't know about you. I had a good upbringing. I didn't have nothing traumatic happen to me. I didn't have anything other than my dad was an alcoholic and he wasn't around. Okay, so that's the one factor that had a play other than when I got into high school and started hanging around people that were smoking weed, doing shit, and I wanted to fit in. And so I started doing that shit, you know? My mom smoked and stuff like that, and it didn't really pique my curiosity until probably around 13 when other people I was hanging around started talking about the shit. And then I'm like, oh, the green stuff that my mom smokes, you know, I'm like, oh, let me go in there and grab some and try it out, you know? So for me, it's just about trying to build their self-esteem and make them understand that, like, happiness comes from within. You're not going to find it in a drug. You're just not. Like, you're only going to go down a very reckless, destructive road. The other thing is I am so transparent about myself and what I'm going through. They know everything. They know everything from my past, no matter how horrific it may seem. I tell them all kinds of war stories because I want them to understand that I've experienced that on a level where I am authorized to give them advice in those areas. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, transgender and some of these other subjects, I don't feel qualified is the word I was looking for. I don't feel qualified at all to even speak on that shit. So I'm just like, when the conversation starts, it's like, all right, well, let me do some research on it. Let me tell you what my research comes up with. Let me see if we can come to an understanding. And for me personally, I take a very different approach than most people do. And I just tell them, like, look, if you're going to get into shit, come talk to me about it. I'm not going to get mad at you or anything. Like, if anything else, I can instruct you on how to conduct yourself in a way that's going to keep you from creating a habit or creating or doing stupid shit in stupid places with stupid people. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to get drunk for the first time, right? But if you're a female, you don't want your first alcohol experience to be with 5 dudes, you know what I mean, that are also drinking, you know what I mean, at a freaking house where there's no guardians, there's no nothing, right? So it's like, and I saw that shit in high school, bro. I saw that a lot, dude. I saw girls that were overprotectively parented, or parented in an overprotected fashion. And I saw them, like, once they were able to get out of their parents' sight, man, I saw them just let loose and go wild. So, you know, at some level, I think if you take the tabooism away from it and make it not so, oh, let's not talk about that. Oh, let's not have that conversation, or don't watch that stuff because it may put thoughts in your head about what's what. It's like it's a thin line, bro. It's like, there's no fucking manuals on this shit.
Okay,
you know?
So wait, you said, okay, there's 2 points. I'm going to touch the last one, the thing you just said, and that is, don't watch that stuff because it may put thoughts in your head, right? So you gave a directive to not do something, and we already know from, this is the problem I had, the issue I had with the DARE program, how it was presented. They bring out the thing, they snap open the briefcase, they bring in, this car was seized by a drug dealer and it's a Corvette, and all the kids get little pamphlets with drugs. Just say no, I dare you, double dog dare you, like truth or dare. And they know what they were doing. That's my opinion. That
right.
It was like imprinting in a way. But what I'm getting at is do you say don't watch that, or do you say, hey, do you realize when you watch that stuff, that show, it's in training you into thinking a particular way and present it like that? Yeah,
absolutely. The second, yeah. So I am not gonna be their filter in life. You know what I mean? Like, they're, at the end of the day, yes, they're young and they're impressionable and all that stuff, but like, number one, it's impossible, bro. I mean, like you said, there's information overload. It's coming from all angles, bro. Unless you're a goddamn ninja, you can't cut off all sources of information that are going to be put into their heads through a friend, someone at school, someone on the bus, like whatever it is, right? So you can only do what you can do. So, you know, obviously, I have filters and things like that. They can't go on adult websites and stupid shit like that. I have a time restraint on how much they can use their devices. I think those are, like, you know, some of the only practical things you can do, other than, like you said, like, make sure they're aware of what is reality and what is not. Giving them some tools to decipher truth from falsehood, if you will, by fact checking and checking the boxes. You know what I mean? Is this a .org site? Okay, cool. What's that mean? Okay, so it looks like it's it's an independent nonprofit. Okay, cool. Where do they come from? When did they start? Who's behind them? You know what I mean? Who's running the damn show, right? So I think all those things can help. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, they're being bombarded by so much. It's so hard to give them much more than just some tools and say, hey, you know, let's say they're on social media and they see all these successful people and all these great plastic bodies and, and all this other stuff going on. They're going to naturally, reflect who they are and compare it to that person. And so that's the hard part, is there's social media is a false reality. And the hard part is making them aware of that, because even I get sucked into that sometimes. I'm like, especially when I was down and low at rock bottom levels, you look at everybody on social media and you think they're happy and they're successful because that's what they show you. They don't show you when they're in the fetal position having detox, right? They're going through alcohol withdrawals. They don't post that shit on social media. You know what I mean? Like nobody's like gung ho about telling you about their weaknesses or about where they're failing in life. And but it's so evident that we all have these struggles, bro. Like whether I remember one time I quit smoking cigarettes and I was just hanging out with my cousins and I was like, man, it's really weird. I feel like I'm getting addicted to food, you know? And I was like starting to gain weight and shit. And they both looked at me like I was crazy because they had been dealing with food addiction their entire lives, but they've never had drug addictions, right? So it's like I didn't know you guys had like food addiction issues, and they're both a little overweight, and it makes sense. Every time I see them, they're drinking and eating, you know, and I'm like, oh wow, so a lot of people are already dealing with this, and I've never personally dealt with food addiction until like this is when I was completely sober. I quit smoking cigarettes, and so there was like nothing else to kind of fill that void. I wasn't having sex. I didn't have a girl. Like I was completely abstinence. So food became like my dopamine, you know what I mean, for a while, and I had to become very aware of that shit to move back from it.
How are you teaching them about addiction as a disease in the family? As in, this chemical or anything in reality may affect you differently than other people. You know, it's not just you wanting to be curious or experiment in the future. It's slightly different.
I'm glad you said that, because maybe there needs to be more attention on that. I've never really sat down and broke it down. But my mom used to say it to me all the time, so it's surprising that this is something that I haven't really gone over a whole lot with them. And I'm sure I've talked about it, but I've never sat down and really had like a thorough conversation about it. But yeah, my mom's always used to try to tell me the same thing, and she missed the ball a little bit because she was so focused on me becoming an alcoholic. Interestingly enough, my mom was so like focused on me drinking that she never paid much attention to my drug use. And then this is the other thing. She came from the 60s counterculture. So in her mind, doing certain drugs was like just experimenting because that's what she went through. She never had the addiction tendencies that my dad was an alcoholic. My mom was just a hippie who experimented, you know what I mean? So she didn't have that perspective, and she just would tell me that, like, yeah, she'd be like, hey, there's like a 75% chance that you could be an alcoholic just based on genetics. And so I was always very aware of that, but that didn't really change anything, dude. It didn't.
Right. So from her, when she was kind of monitoring, she's monitoring for the alcoholic behavior of drinking.
But when I was in high school, I vividly remember kids, hundreds of them, going in their parents' pill counters and shit and just bringing random pills to school. Now, this was before cell phones, right? This was before you could just jump on Google right there on the spot and say, X, -10 oval white pill, right? And then you get your fucking answer. So people would come to school with every shape, color, and size pill you could imagine and just hand them out. They'd bring 20 and hand them out and trade them for some other shit. So we were like popping shit back then in high school. We didn't even fucking know what it was, bro. Like straight up, we were just eating shit that people were telling us, like, oh yeah, these are Percocets. And I'm like, I've never seen perks like that, but okay. Like that was the culture that I kind of came from in high school. Now, I don't know if it was like that at your high school or if this was just something that was unique to my region, but and I hope it's not like that in high school anymore, because heaven forbid my kids go and it's like that, but I don't know. They're so concerned about what other people think about them. You know what I mean? Like they're literally obsessed with how they look and how they sound and how tall they are and how fat they are and all these different things that it almost dictates their reality at like at a really high level, it dictates their reality. You know what I mean? It's their insecurities.
Okay, but so what happens if their insecurities are filled by hanging around friends who are in the drug culture and now gives them a sense of identity that they can relate with, man? That's how it happened with you. That's kind of how it happened with me.
So, I mean, that's all I can do on my end is just give them a safe place and somewhere where they can be honest. You know, like I don't know how else to monitor their friends other than to get to know their friends. And again, I ask them a lot of questions about their friends to kind of get almost a psychoanalysis. And right now, friends concern me a little bit, and not because of drug usage, but just because of who they are. They're a little bit older. But what do you fucking do, man? I mean, you tell your kid they can't hang out with people that they fucking relate to. You know, it's a hard thing, man. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers on that one, brother.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I've known you for a while, obviously, and I've always known you to be one of the most authentic people I've met ever, man. And that's why we've stayed in touch for so long. I just want to tell you, man, I appreciate everything you're doing. And I talked to, like I said, your son. I enjoyed that conversation. And
man, he sounds so grown up. When you sent me those clips, man, I was like, you sound like you're talking to a grown man, man. It was really put a huge smile on my face, man, to hear him communicating with someone else at a different level than he communicates with me or his mom. Because, you know, it's like I see it when they're talking to other people in different places, you know, but at the end of the day, you're family to us, you know what I mean? So it's more of like, hey, talk to Kyle because he knows the shit and he's a good friend and I trust him, you know what I mean?